Thanks, guys. We're going to allow the Kingdom kids just to go out at the back. So, Kingdom kids, you are so welcome to go out at the back where Lemma is, and she'll be with you this morning. Thanks, Lemma. Perfect. And church, not to over-exaggerate on a message, but this a little bit of a shorter message this morning, because you'll see there's a bit of a practical for us. But just something for us. It can be one of the most pivotal messages for you this year. Okay, so it can be one of the most pivotal messages for you this year, and you'll see why in a little bit. Those that weren't with us last week, just want to encourage you. We learned just that, even as this year approaches, to be humble and sit at the Lord's feet, to know our weakness. We looked at last week. Okay, to know our weaknesses and bring it to the Lord to have His power and His filling in the year ahead. Okay, so to be alert to our weaknesses was what last week was on. Now, building in this and on this, we're looking at prayerfully planning the year ahead. So prayerfully planning the year ahead. I'm not too sure if you've ever made a decision that's come back, I think the phrase is to bite you. Okay, where you've made a decision, and maybe even a decision at the time that seemed really good. Have you ever made a decision and you're like, that's a pretty good decision. And then later on you find out, actually, that's not great. Okay, I thought it was a good decision at the time. I would have probably still made the same decision, but it hasn't turned out the way that I wanted to. It turned out to not be the best decision at the time. Now, I don't know about you, I've been in situations like that, where you've made decisions and then later on you're like, okay, should have done that a little bit differently. And so I think we've all, at some stage in our life, hopefully just yours is not recent, okay, made a decision that we're like, should have thought about that a little bit more. Now, today's message, there's biblical guidance on how to avoid that more this year. How to avoid making decisions that we go, that wasn't what was best, or I shouldn't have made that. That's what we're looking at this year, how to avoid that more. And so we're looking at Joshua 9 from verses 1 to 27. So Joshua 9, 1 to 27, and thanks to the team, they'll put it up for us, and I'll read for us from Joshua 9 now as well. Okay, I almost read from Judges 9. Okay, from Joshua 9. As soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and in the lowland all along the coast of the great sea towards Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they, on their part, acted with cunning and went and made ready provisions and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys and wineskins, worn out and torn and mended, with worn-out patched sandals on their feet and worn-out clothes. And all their provisions were dry and crumbly. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and to the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us." But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "Perhaps you live among us. Then how can we make a covenant with you?" They said to Joshua, "We are your servants." And Joshua said to them, "Who are you? And where do you come from?" They said to him, "From a very distant country your servants have come, because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard a report of him, and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon the king of Heshbon, and to Og king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth." So our elders and all the inhabitants of the country said to us, "Take provisions in your hand for the journey and go to meet them and say to them, 'We are your servants. Come now, make a covenant with us. Here is our bread. It was still warm when we took it from our houses as our food for the journey on the day we set out to come to you. But now, behold, it is dry and crumbly. These wineskins were new when we filled them, and behold, they have burst. And these garments and sandals of ours are worn out from the very long journey.' So the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord, And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live, and the leaders of the congregation swore to them. At the end of 3 days, after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors and that they lived among them. And the people of Israel set out and reached their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Sephia, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the people of Israel did not attack them, because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. Then all the congregation murmured against the leaders, but all the leaders said to the congregation, "We have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. This we will do to them. Let them live, lest wrath be upon us, because of the oath that we swore to them." And the leaders said to them, "Let them live." So they became cutters of wood and drawers of water for all the congregation, just as the leaders had said to them. Joshua summoned them, and he said to them, "Why did you deceive us, saying, 'We are very far from you,' when you dwell among us? Now therefore you are cursed, and some of you shall never be anything but servants, cutters of wood, and drawers of water for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Because it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God has commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you and did this thing. And now, behold, we are in your hand. Whatever seems good and right in your sight to do to us, do it." So he did this to them and delivered them out of the hand of the people of Israel, and they did not kill them. But Joshua made them that day cutters of wood and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord, to this day in the place that he should choose. Okay, and so you might be more familiar with that story this morning of Joshua going in. Context over here, Joshua has just been promised by the Lord and guided by the Lord to take the promised land. Okay, so they had to now actively take and war to get this promised land. And as they come, Joshua's busy on these escapades, on these journeys to take the promised land. And over here, we pick up the story as they're following God in this. Nations hear about it. And we see as Joshua and the Israelites, and as they're following God and doing what he says and what he desires, we see there's opposition in verses 1 and 2. So we can't forget that. In verse 1 and 2, we see that nations, they make a pact and they form a unity to come against Joshua and the Israelites to fight them openly. This is after, again, God's guidance. If you rewind to Joshua 8, 1-3, you'll see this is them going forward in obedience to the Lord, in taking the promised land. And so in their obedience to the Lord, there is opposition, but we also see verse 3-13. There isn't just open opposition, but there's a cunning plan. Okay, there's a cunning plan. Here, a strong nation. And you see later on, as you read through and as you go through Joshua 10, you'll see that this was an established nation. Okay, one that actually some of the other nations feared as well a little bit. They hear about what's going on, what Israel is doing by the Lord, and they come subtly. Okay, they come subtly, they come quietly, they come gently, and they try to deceive with good words and actions and physical proof seemingly accurate. Okay, and so Joshua and them are following the Lord, and here nations mount a challenge against them, and people just come and visit Joshua on the side of this. Okay, he's used to people coming outright against him. But in this, I want you to see verse 7, amongst everything that's going on. Okay, there's plans. Joshua has plans, and even for us in the year ahead, there's certain plans, there's certain things we need to do, and God has guided in certain things for Joshua. And here comes a side situation, and all of a sudden, as he's hearing the side situation, verse 7 comes along, which is a good thing. There is good caution. Okay, Joshua questions, but you guys are saying this, but what happens if you're actually from among us? And God wants us to take this land, so he'll want us to conquer you. You're saying you're far away, but if you're of us, then actually we can't make a covenant with you. Okay, because the Lord has told us to do something. And so there's a bit of caution from Joshua, from the elders and the leaders of Israel at the time, which is good. But verse 8 comes in. There's kind words and flattery. Okay, we are your servants. We are in your hands. You can choose to do with us what you will. We are your servants. Okay, there's flattery, there's kind words. Verse 9-11, there's good research. Okay, done by the Gibeonites over here. Very good research. Okay, they knew what God had done. Hey, God has helped you conquer, foreign lands like Ai. He's helped you conquer Jericho, which was a fortress. We've heard of your God leading you out of Egypt. They knew the story. They knew what God was doing amongst the Israelites. They had flattery, kind words. They had good research. And verse 11, they had a good moral story. We're coming neighborly. We've heard of your good and we're struggling and we just want to make a covenant with you. Okay, so there's flattery, there's good research, there's a good moral story. And verse 12 and 13, their story seems to make proof with the physical things that are presented to them. And we know that the Gibeonites did this in deception. Let's take worn out sandals. Let's take bread and leave it there for a few days and take it. And then their story was, on our travel we set out and now it's gone, hard and taste, see. So there were physical proofs that also seemed to bear true of this deception. Now, with all going on here, put your mind, in the Israelite shoes a little bit. Okay, they're busy conquering, they're hearing what the Lord does and says, and he has a side situation. Doesn't seem as pressing as what the Lord has just done. He's helped them conquer Jericho. Wow, they could be in celebration of that. Help them conquer Ai. Wow, in celebration of that. And now there's nations rising against them. You can see maybe the focal point is here. Something comes on the side. Okay? With all that going on, how should a God-fearing nation, and even with Joshua, how should a God-fearing person decide what to do in this situation? You might give the right biblically context answer here, but let me personalize it for you. I think what we do normally in life, which seems generally wise, is in our best wisdom, we pause. Okay, it can be detrimental without pausing as well. We pause maybe. We weigh the options. Maybe even you're someone that makes a pros and cons list. Okay? Maybe not. Maybe you're just weighing the options. What evidence is there? This is a decision before me. What do I need to do? Let me pause. What are the options? And then we decide what seems best with what is presented before us. I think in general, that's how most people make decisions. Look, it's a little bit wiser than people that just make decisions because there's no pause, there's no caution. Okay, so over here, I think that's what we follow, and I think that's what a lot of people follow, but that's not how a decision-making process should go. Okay? And you hear from a lot of people, weigh your options, think through things. Yeah, there is an aspect of wisdom in them, but as a godly people, even with the year ahead, that's not how our decision-making process should go. Verse 14, they took some of their provisions, but they did not ask counsel from the Lord. They did not ask counsel from the Lord. Verse 15, then Joshua made the decision and made a covenant with them. Okay, Joshua made the decision, and he goes and makes a covenant with them. It only takes 3 days after they've made this decision. And again, if we analyze this, very easily people could turn this and go, if there was a different outcome, I think people would be going, that makes total sense. They heard what the people were saying, they mentioned their caution, they decided what was best while evaluating the situation. Not a bad situation. But over here we see 3 days into it. Once they're now following something the Lord had previously said in conquering the promised land and taking the land for themselves, for the Lord, they reach a destination and they realize, hold on, these people we've made a covenant with are our neighbors. 3 days later, okay, in verse 16, they found out that the Gibeonites had lied to them. It was a lie. They'd made the covenant, and now the evidence that they made the covenant on is a lie. Over here, we have to pause. Okay, we've got to notice that Joshua and the Israelites made a mistake here, and we'll dig into that. But there's also an element of grace, because I think sometimes in life when this happens, when we make a bad decision, and over here a bad decision was made, it seems like they followed the right steps. They've got the most pivotal one, but it seems like they followed earthly good steps. But they made a wrong decision. Often with us, what can happen, and especially through the year, if we make a bad decision, okay, and maybe how often or not you're prone to making bad decisions, but every now and then in our humanness, we will make a bad decision. If you make a bad decision, often in life, we tend to compound that bad decision with more bad decisions. It's like that old thing with a lie even. You know, if you tell a lie, then you have to tell 10 lies to compensate for the one lie, and you're just digging and making a massive snowball. Okay, but sometimes it happens with decisions. You make a bad decision, and then in order you present it, that was bad, and you make an impulse bad decision on the bad decision. And you can easily compound the situation to something that's way worse than what it was. And over here, we actually have to pause and give Joshua and the Israelites a little bit of credit. Because if you look at what happened, they made a bad decision, but they knew the Lord wanted them to honor the covenant. They had made a covenant. And they knew, look, the Lord wants us to honor this covenant. And so what we have to do is we have to follow through on our oath. We have to follow through on this covenant that we have made. That's what the Lord would want us to do. Now again, I just need to pause, because in your life there'll be different situations. And every decision you make, even if it's a bad decision, what we're not saying today is you have to follow through on every decision. Okay, we're not saying that today. Over here, they knew that the Lord valued covenant. He valued their word. And they made a deep covenant. It was a deep promise back in the day. And so the Lord would want them to honor something that they had committed to. But with other biblical things in context, if you've made a bad decision and you realize it's a bad decision, but following through on it is going to dishonor God more, then you have to opt out. Okay? Then you have to opt out. So even if you've made a bad decision or you committed to something and you realize, if I follow through with this, it's going to dishonor God more, then you have to opt out. But over here, they had committed to something and then they realize, oh man, we shouldn't have committed to it, but we actually know God would want us to follow through with this. Even though we've made a bad decision, we need to follow through with it. It's the right thing to do. It's the godly thing to do. And so they were stuck in the situation where they had to honor this oath and this covenant. And so here they followed through. In verses 21 to 27, you see that it's not a desired outcome. Now they're left with inhabitants of the land that don't come from the history that they come from, that don't know the God that they know, that don't worship the God that they know. And so they're going to make them slaves in the situation, and you might be going, oh, well, that's not too bad. Okay? You know, they still get free help in the situation that they're going through, or something. But as you read through Joshua 10, you see now that the other nations that were going to come against Joshua, okay, while he's fighting, while he's trying to gain ground for the Lord, and he's trying to focus on things, we need to gain ground, we need to get the promised land, tribes, are you with me? We need to get these things. All of a sudden, the side covenant that he had made, and now he has to honor, the nations aren't coming against Israel. They first want to take out the Gibeonites. And now it's not even Joshua's fight. He's focusing on what the Lord wants him to focus on, but now there's a distraction. There's something on the side that he has to deal with. And him and his army and Israelites, and risking lives and energy and resources, he has to take from that and go, we need to defend these people because of a decision we made. I know we need to stand in this, and it's going to take resources and maybe even lives and effort. We made a covenant. We need to defend these people. And so can you see our small covenant or small decision over here, even though you're like, okay, not such a bad outcome because they get people in the land. The Lord didn't want that. But now you see the ramifications going down the line. It was costly, all because they didn't consult the Lord. The Lord by his grace, though, and he has a grace again just to see, the Lord by his grace helps in it. This is where Joshua, as you read on in the story of Joshua, where he tells the son to keep still, and he requests that of the Lord. So even though he didn't make a decision that was wise, and now he has to follow through in it, the Lord wanted him to follow through with it. And as he does, the Lord's hand is on them to actually help the Gibeonites. And so it's important just to see that the Lord's grace was on them, even though they made a bad decision and they tried to rectify that, the Lord's hand was on them to do that. But you can see that wouldn't have even happened in the first place if they had done one thing. And that was consult the Lord. Proverbs 3:5-7. A lot of people have this as a verse, that's key. We'll read 5 and 6 this morning. That's key for their lives. And it stands out to a lot, but man, so profound. And it's just trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. And we see over there, even wise methods in a worldly system and going about a decision in a way that makes sense, Joshua and the Israelites leant on their own understanding. And that's what caused them to make a decision that later on had ramifications that they had to deal with. So over there, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Verse 7 goes on just to mention, don't be, wise in your own eyes. And so, church, in our planning for the year ahead, it's not a bad thing. Okay, to plan ahead, man, we even see the Lord give precedent to that. To plan ahead, to be prepared, to structure, to have goals, to be driven, to be ambitious, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. Okay? But in doing that, there's two key focal points. The one is that we want the Lord's plan, not ours. If we're Christians and we want Him to direct our lives, man, then let Him direct. We put it before Him and we go, Lord, I have my goals, I have that. But it's going, okay, but Lord, what are your goals for me? Lord, what do I need to focus on this year? So it's taking that drive, it's taking that foreseeing, it's taking that vision that you want to have for the year ahead, still going through that, but it's not placing it in your own understanding and your evaluation of things. But it's going, okay, Lord, I still want to plan for the year ahead, I still want to do this, I still want to see the goals, but Lord, that's in your hands. Let me sit with you. Lord, the year ahead, what is priority? Okay, in this sphere, Lord, what do I need to be doing here? What's a focal point here? And allowing Him to shape that. And so as we prayerfully plan, a few key tips for us, for those that want to jot it down, is the first thing, that there is some good in what the Israelites did, but don't be hasty. Don't be hasty. Okay? Often decisions made quickly or in haste without a little bit of a pause and evaluation can end up coming back to bite us. So don't be hasty. Straight after don't be hasty is the most important thing. Consult the Lord first. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Okay? Consult the Lord first. If a bad decision is made, okay, see what honors the Lord in it. And if you need to pull out or if you need to push through, seek the Lord's guidance and help and do that to rectify a decision or for strength in a decision. Okay? But when the Lord directs, as seen even in verse 1 and 2, from following the Lord, there was opposition. Okay, so remember, it isn't just about this decision. If you actually look back, Joshua and the Israelites were doing well because they were already honoring the Lord in some decisions. Remember, that's why the 5 kings over there in verse 1 and 2 desire to go against them, because they're actually following the Lord. And so when we make God-honoring decisions, there often will be opposition. Okay? It wasn't just easy. The Lord said, I must do this or focus on this year. That's going to be a breeze. The Lord said, I must do that. Yes, it's going to be easy. The Lord said so. No. He said do it, but it doesn't mean that it won't come without a little bit of effort, a little bit of opposition. Okay? But what we see here as well is in the year ahead, in making decisions, try and bring each decision to the Lord. In verse 1 and 2, we see Joshua and them making God-honoring decisions. But it didn't continue here with the Gibeonites. They sought the Lord in these decisions, but then they didn't seek Him in this decision. So be careful this year of going, this one I'm going to consult the Lord in. This one I'm going to do this. Okay, this one I'm going to do this. This one I'm going to consult the Lord in. Okay, that's what happened here. And so just be careful in all your decisions. And I want to put that out there, because then in all things, do you have goals with family this year? Do you have goals with work this year? Goals with things to achieve or do this year? Spiritual goals this year? All of those things. Okay, work, family, business, everything included, bring them all before the Lord and allow Him to direct them. And so again, don't be hasty, consult the Lord, know that there might be opposition, and continue consulting Him in every decision. Okay? And if you make a bad decision, seek the Lord in what honors Him going forward. Okay, so it's not like, I've made a bad decision, there goes that for the year. Okay, no, okay, Lord, how do I rectify that before you? And so, church, what we're going to do is actually practicalize that a little bit today. And so we're going to, it's about us knowing the Lord. Okay, it's not just a good presentation or anything. It's about us growing in the Lord. And so I'd love for us to provide time for us to do that now. Okay, so we're going to hand out some pens and paper, and I'm going to lead us through a bit of prayer time. And I'd love you just to write down everything that the Lord lays on your heart in different categories. Okay, so here's a time. I'm helping you with step 1. Okay, consulting the Lord, pausing. Even step 2, coming before the Lord and going, Lord, this year, what are focal points? And we're going to go through a few different categories together. And I'd love you just to write down a few categories. And then as we pray, if the Lord brings something to mind, He might bring scripture to your mind that you've been reading already through this year. He might already be prompting. Even in the stillness before Him, I'll ask the team maybe just to play some light worship music in the background for us. But even in just a little bit of stillness as we're here to encounter the Lord and engage with Him, He might bring certain things to mind or refine certain thoughts as we sit here, because we're seeking a real God's guidance who gives guidance. And so we're going to do that practically now together. Okay? So anyone happy to help me hand out some papers? And Anna, Jocelyn, would you guys maybe just a few upstairs, please, if that's okay? Thank you. I wonder if you've already put your name on the paper? No, you don't have to. This will be for you to keep, but we're going to pray through it just in a little. So I'll ask you just to write a category, whichever way you want to write. You're just going to write a category, underline it, and then we'll give some prayer time just to see if the Lord gives you anything for that category. And we'll do 3 or 4 categories this morning, just that we can write things down for. Okay. Perfect. One of the first things, church, that I want you to do as we just enter a time of prayer before we even write some of those categories is to say a prayer by yourself. And literally that's just going to be, thanks Jocelyn, thanks Anna. Is just saying to the Lord, Lord, I have my plans, but Lord, I desire yours. And so would you guide me now? And so I want you just to pray that simple prayer. You can put it in your own words if you desire. But we all have our own plans in our mind. That's how we geared. And just to say, Lord, you know I have my plans. Would you just still that and may I be alert to your plans now for the year? So why don't you just pray that yourself with Jesus now? Okay, and on your paper, I'd love you just to write down spiritual. All of our life is spiritual, we know, but spiritual. And just pray to the Lord, and just you're welcome to have conversation with Jesus through this, but just to say, Lord, what are some things spiritually in the year ahead that I need to be alert to? Maybe the Lord says more regular quiet times. Be specific. Okay, so just, try have a quiet time each and every morning, and church on Sundays or whatever. It might be with your quiet times. It might be being more prayerful. It might be reading a spiritual book through the year. Lord, what are any goals spiritually that I need to be alert to with you and me? And then if there's anything, feel free to write it down.